Imagine a child. Okay. He's sitting in one of those stifling mid-19th century schoolrooms.
Total silence, rote memorization.
Exactly. And this kid is just vibrating with energy, staring out the window, completely unable to focus. And the schoolmaster, this rigid guy with zero patience, he looks at the boy and just labels him addled.
And we have to understand what that word meant back then. It wasn't just a casual insult.
No.
It was basically a diagnosis. It meant your brain was scrambled, empty. It was the teacher saying, this one's a write-off.
Right. This unit is defective. And if you just looked at the raw data of this kid's early life, you might almost agree. He spent, a grand total of maybe 3 months in a formal school.
And by the time he's a teenager, he's almost entirely deaf. He's awkward, he's always a bit disheveled, and he has a bit of a habit of accidentally starting fires.
If you saw that on a resume today, you'd predict a life of struggle. You certainly would not predict that this same addled kid would grow up to secure 1,093 patents.
You wouldn't think he'd be the one to literally light up our civilization after dark.
Or that he'd be the reason we have recorded sound, the reason we have movies, the reason we have, the entire concept of an electrical grid.
We are talking, of course, about Thomas Alva Edison.
But we're not here today to just do the standard greatest hits tour. I mean, we all know about the light bulb.
We do.
The real mission of this deep dive is to get to the core of the paradox. How did a man who couldn't hear music invent the phonograph? How did a man who kept getting fired become maybe the most prolific inventor in American history?
And to do that, you have to look past the gadgets. You have to look at the machinery he built. And I don't mean the physical machines. I mean the system of innovation. We've got stacks of biographies, letters, patent records right here, and they tell a story.
It's not a story about a wizard with a magic wand.
No, it's about a grinder, a man who industrialized the very act of inventing. We need to get past that caricature of the old man with the white hair and really dig into the grit of what he called the invention factory.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. The Addled years. He was born in 1847, Milan, Ohio.
Right, and he's the youngest of 7 children. His father, Samuel, he's a bit of a character. A Canadian political exile, kind of a restless hustler, always chasing the next big thing.
And his mother?
His mother, Nancy, she's the anchor. She's a former teacher, very educated, very devout. The family eventually moves to Port Huron, Michigan, when Edison is about 7, and that's when he enters that classroom we were talking about.
And lasts for all of 12 weeks.
Barely. Edison was just, he wasn't built for that Victorian model of education.
Which was all about silence and repetition.
Right. And Edison was all about noise and asking why. He just asked too many questions. He couldn't sit still. Today we might look at him and think ADHD, but back then he was just a difficult child.
So when the teacher calls him addled, he runs home completely crushed.
And tells his mother, and this right here, this is one of those huge turning points in history, because Nancy Edison doesn't side with the school. She doesn't tell her son Al to just try harder to fit in.
No, she does the opposite.
She gets furious. She marches right back to that school, gives the teacher a piece of her mind, and pulls her son out forever. She decides, I'll homeschool him myself.
There's that amazing quote from Edison later in life.
My mother was the making of me. I felt I had someone to live for. Think about that psychological shift. In one afternoon, he goes from being told he's broken to being told he's special.
That's everything. And she didn't just teach him, reading and writing. The stuff this kid was reading was intense.
It was college-level material. By the time he's 11 or 12, he's devouring a book called A School Compendium of Natural and Experimental Philosophy.
Not exactly a storybook.
No, it was a manual. It was a how-to guide for the physical world, mechanics, hydraulics, chemistry. He was reading Thomas Paine. He's not just learning facts, he's learning how to question everything.
And he's doing a lot of this in a kind of forced isolation because of his hearing loss. Let's talk about that, because the stories are all over the place.
Yeah, there's a lot of myth around it. It was likely a combination of things. He probably had scarlet fever when he was young, which can damage the auditory nerves.
Okay.
And he also had chronic untreated ear infections, which were incredibly common back then. Then there's that famous story he used to tell.
The train story.
The train story. That a conductor lifted him up by his ears onto a moving train, and he felt something snap inside his head.
Which sounds, partly painful and partly like Edison being a great storyteller.
Probably a little of both. But whatever the cause, the result was real. He was shut off from the normal chatter of the world. He couldn't hear birds. He couldn't hear playground gossip. So he had to turn inward.
And he saw it as an advantage.
He really did. He saw his deafness not as a liability, but as a superpower for concentration. It blocked out all the distractions. He even called it a blessing for his work later on.
And that focus, it translates into this work ethic that is, frankly, terrifying for a 12-year-old. He gets a job on the Grand Trunk Railroad.
As a news butcher, it's such a great Victorian term.
It is.
He's just walking the aisles of the train that runs from Port Huron to Detroit, selling newspapers, candy, molasses, peanuts, you name it. A grueling job. Starts at 7 in the morning, goes late into the night.
But he's not just a vendor, is he? He's an entrepreneur from day one. He realizes people want fresh produce, so he starts buying butter and berries from farmers along the tracks.
And selling them for a profit in Detroit. He's doing arbitrage at age 12.
It's incredible. And then he escalates. He has all this downtime on the train during layovers. So what does he do? He convinces the conductor to let him set up a chemistry lab.
In the baggage car.
In the baggage car. Just try to picture that for a second. An 1860s steam train, rattling and shaking, smoke everywhere, and in the back, a kid is mixing volatile chemicals.
It's a disaster waiting to happen. But before the disaster, he does something even more amazing. He buys a small secondhand printing press.
Of course he does.
And sets it up right next to the chemicals. He starts publishing the Grand Trunk Herald. It's the first newspaper in history to be printed on a moving vehicle.
And it wasn't just like his diary. It was a real paper.
It was a real paper. He'd report on train schedule changes, local gossip, market prices. He sold hundreds of copies a week to the passengers. It just shows you his instinct was never just inventing. It was always about creating a product for an audience.
Until the chemistry catches up with him.
Inevitably. One day, the train lurches, a stick of phosphorus falls on the floor. Now, phosphorus is nasty stuff.
It ignites on contact with air.
Yep. Sets the wooden floor of the car on fire. The conductor rushes in, stamps it out, and just tosses Edison and his entire mobile laboratory onto the platform at the next station.
Another low point. But, and this seems to be the pattern with him, chaos somehow creates opportunity. He's hanging around the train station, and we get this moment that feels like it's straight out of a movie.
The Jimmy Mackenzie story, it really is cinematic. Edison is 15 now. He's at a station. He sees a toddler, the station agent's son, playing on the tracks.
And there's a loose boxcar rolling right towards him.
Edison doesn't even think. He just dashes out, scoops up the little boy, and dives out of the way just as the wheel grazes his heel.
Wow. And the father, the station agent, he's obviously overwhelmed with gratitude. He doesn't have money to reward Edison, so he offers him something else. He offers to teach him the high-tech skill of the 1860s.
Telegraphy.
Telegraphy.
And we have to really stress how huge this was. To us, a telegraph is just this primitive click-clack thing. But in 1862, this was the Victorian internet. It was the only way information could travel faster than a horse. If you knew Morse code, you were a highly skilled technician. You were a network engineer.
So for the next 5 years, he becomes what they called a tramp telegrapher.
Mm-hmm.
What did that life actually look like?
It's a nomadic life. These guys were, in a way, the hackers of their era. They drift from city to city, Cincinnati, Memphis, Louisville, picking up shifts for Western Union or the railroads. Edison loved it because he could get the night shift.
Fewer people around, more time to tinker.
Exactly. The message traffic was low at night. So he could take the equipment apart. He could experiment with the batteries, play with the circuits. This is where he really learned electricity, not from a book, but by feeling it, by manipulating it. He developed this deep intuitive sense of how current actually works.
There's an interesting irony here, though, with his hearing, isn't there? How does a deaf guy operate a machine that's all about sound?
It's fascinating. The telegraph sounders, they make this sharp clicking noise because Edison couldn't hear the ambient noise of the office, the chatter, the sounds from the street. He could actually isolate and focus on that sharp, percussive sound of the metal bar.
Or even feel the vibration.
Or feel the vibration. It became a tactile language for him. He was tuned into the machine in a way that other operators weren't.
But he's still, chaotic Edison. He's still getting fired for sleeping on the job or for nearly causing train collisions because he was reading a book instead of listening to the wire.
Yeah, he was not a model employee. He eventually drifts to Boston, and at 21, he files for his very first patent, the electric vote recorder.
And this is such a perfect Edison story, a brilliant piece of engineering that completely misunderstands human nature.
It's a perfect solution to a problem nobody wanted solved. He saw legislatures doing these long, slow roll call votes. It took hours. So he builds this device. Every representative has a yes and no button at their desk. Push the button, and the machine instantly tallies the vote.
It's accurate, it's fast, it's flawless. He takes it to Washington, D.C., thinking he's about to make his fortune.
And the committee chairman basically laughs him out of the room. He told Edison, and this is almost a direct quote, "If there is any invention on Earth that we don't want down here, that is it."
Because that slowness, that inefficiency is part of the political process?
It's a feature, not a bug. That time is when the lobbying happens, the arm twisting, the deal making, and instant vert kills all of that.
And this just crushed him.
It did, but it also forged his entire professional philosophy. He made a vow right then and there. Anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. He learned that utility isn't just about technical perfection. It's about whether people, the market, actually want what you're selling.
A hard lesson. So, chastened, he heads to the only place you go when you want to make money. New York City. It's 1869. He's completely broke.
Sleeping in the basement boiler room of the gold exchange on Wall Street. And then another one of these fate moments.
The stock ticker.
The stock ticker. It was the central nervous system of finance. It's a telegraph that prints stock prices on a paper tape. One day, the main transmitter breaks down. The whole floor erupts in panic. Nobody knows the prices.
And Edison, the kid who's been sleeping in the basement and studying the machine, he just steps up.
He steps up and says, "I think I know what's wrong. It was a broken spring." He fixes it in a few minutes, the machine starts ticking again, and suddenly he's the hero of Wall Street.
He gets a job on the spot.
Instantly. But he doesn't just rest on that. He immediately starts improving the ticker, making it more reliable, synchronizing multiple machines. He sells his patents for the improvements to Western Union. He was hoping for maybe, $5,000.
And they offer him
$40,000.
which today is what, close to $1 million?
Something like that. It's a life-changing amount of money. And this is the real test of his character, right? A lot of 22-year-olds would buy a mansion and retire.
Or at least have a good time.
Edison takes every single dollar, moves to Newark, New Jersey, and sets up his own manufacturing shop. He just doubles down on the work.
And that shop eventually evolves, in 1876, into the legendary lab at Menlo Park. This is often called the birth of modern innovation. What made it so different from just another workshop?
Okay, so before Menlo Park, the model of invention was the lone genius. Some guy in his shed whittling away at a better mousetrap.
Right.
Edison created the Invention Factory. He bought land in this quiet little hamlet and built a 2-story laboratory. But the real invention was the human system. He hired specialists.
He knew he couldn't be the expert on everything.
Exactly. He hired Charles Batchelor, who was a brilliant English mechanic and draftsman. He hired John Crucy, a Swiss clockmaker who could build literally anything Edison could draw. He hired mathematicians. He built a world-class technical library. He stocked the shelves with every chemical, every metal, every fiber you could imagine.
He had that famous goal that he wanted a minor invention every 10 days and a big trick every 6 months.
That was the business plan. He was effectively selling research and development as a product. And the first big trick to come out of that factory, it wasn't the light bulb. It was something that honestly scared people. It was the phonograph.
1877. Let's set the scene. We have the telegraph, which is text. We have the telephone, which is live voice. But no one had ever stored a voice.
It was completely inconceivable. Sound was ephemeral. The second you said something, poof, it was gone forever. Edison was actually working on improving the telephone transmitter, trying to make the signal clearer.
Okay.
And he noticed that the vibrations from his voice could make a little needle prick his finger. And the light bulb goes off. He thinks, if my voice can vibrate a needle, then that needle can scratch a record of those vibrations onto a soft surface.
He sketches out a quick design, hands it to John Crucy, the master machinist.
And Crucy builds it. It's the simple little thing, a brass cylinder wrapped in a sheet of tinfoil with a hand crank.
So Edison leans in, shouts the first thing that comes to his head.
Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. He then resets the needle, turns the crank again, and this scratchy, teeny, but unmistakable voice plays it right back.
And Crucy, the guy who built it, went pale.
He thought it was a trick. This is where the nickname the Wizard of Menlo Park really comes from. When he took the device to the offices of Scientific American magazine, people literally thought it was ventriloquism or some kind of sorcery. To capture a living voice or a dead one and play it back on command, it felt like it broke the laws of time.
But in classic Edison fashion, he gets bored with it pretty quickly. The tinfoil recordings were too fragile. He basically shoves the phonograph in a drawer for a decade to go chase the real white whale.
The light.
Electric light.
And we have to do a little myth busting here. Edison did not invent the first electric light.
Right. Arc lamps already existed.
And arc lamps were absolute beasts. They worked by jumping a massive spark of electricity between two carbon rods. They were blindingly bright, like a modern welding torch.
Good for a lighthouse, not so good for your living room.
Exactly. They hissed, they smoked, they were a fire hazard. The goal was what they called the subdivision of light, to create a small, soft, safe, incandescent light that could replace a gas flame.
And this is where that 99% perspiration quote really comes into play.
This is the grind. The physics problem is immense. You need to find a material, a filament, that will glow when electricity passes through it. But the problem is, anything that gets hot enough to glow white hot usually just burns up or melts instantly.
So you need two things: a near-perfect vacuum inside the glass bulb to remove the oxygen.
So it can't combust. And you need the perfect material for the filament. And they tested everything. Platinum, which was way too expensive. They tried cotton fibers, paper, wood splinters. There's a story they even tested a hair plucked from the beard of one of his assistants.
They tested 6,000 different types of vegetable growths.
And the breakthrough finally came in 1879 with a piece of carbonized cotton sewing thread.
And it worked.
It glowed for 13.5 hours. Later, they found that carbonized bamboo from Japan could last for over 1,000 hours. But the material was only half the problem. The real genius, the thing his competitors missed, was the concept of resistance.
Okay, break that down for us. Why is high resistance so important?
So this is the key insight. Most of his rivals were trying to make filaments with low electrical resistance. But if electricity flows too easily, you need a huge amount of current amperage to make it glow. And a huge amount of current requires massive, thick copper wires to carry it without melting.
You can't wire a city with copper bars. It would be insanely expensive.
Exactly. Edison realized he needed the opposite, a filament with very high resistance, something that fought the flow of electricity. By using high resistance, he could use a high voltage, but a very low current. And low current means you can use thin, cheap copper wires.
He wasn't just inventing a light bulb. He was inventing an economically viable light bulb.
He was inventing a bulb that made the grid possible. And that leads to the whole systems thinking part of this. A light bulb is a useless paperweight if you don't have a socket to screw it into.
Or a switch to turn it on.
Or a fuse so your house doesn't burn down. Or a meter so the power company can bill you. He had to invent all of it. The screw-in socket we still use today, that's Edison. The fuse, Edison. The generators, the dynamos, the underground wiring conduits.
He literally had to build the entire industry from scratch.
Which he did at Pearl Street Station in Lower Manhattan in 1882. He bought an old warehouse, installed his massive jumbo dynamos, and dug trenches to lay miles of wiring under the streets. It was an engineering and political nightmare. But on September 4th, he stood in the office of his biggest investor, J.P. Morgan, flipped a switch.
And the lights went on.
And they stayed on. The gas companies were terrified. He had done it. He had tamed electricity and brought it indoors.
But his victory and his control over that industry, it was actually pretty short-lived.
Yeah.
We have to touch on the war of currents.
Briefly, yeah. So Edison's whole system was built on DC, or direct current. It's safe, it's reliable, but it doesn't travel long distances well. You basically needed a power station every square mile.
And his competitors, George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla, they had a different idea.
They bet on AC, alternating current. AC can be stepped up to incredibly high voltages to be sent over long distances with little power loss, and then stepped down again for safe use in homes.
From a physics standpoint, AC was just better for building a wide-scale grid.
Absolutely. But Edison was stubborn. He was invested in DC. He fought a nasty PR war, claiming AC was deadly dangerous. But in the end, physics and economics won out. The industry consolidated. Edison General Electric merged with a rival to become the General Electric we know today.
And Edison was essentially pushed out of the industry he created.
He cashed out, which for most people would be the end of the story. You retire rich. But this is Edison. In 1887, he moves to West Orange, New Jersey, and builds a new laboratory 10 times bigger than Menlo Park.
West Orange was an industrial monster. 5 main buildings, a massive machine shop. He said he wanted to be able to work on 10 to 20 different projects at the same time.
And one of those projects gave birth to Hollywood.
Motion pictures.
Again, he didn't do it alone. He had a brilliant assistant named W.K.L. Dixon. Edison's goal was, as he put it, to do for the eye what the phonograph does for the ear.
So they developed the kinetograph, which was the camera, and the kinetoscope, which was the viewing device. And they built the world's first movie studio.
The Black Maria.
Right. It looked like a black police wagon, which was called a Black Maria back then.
It was basically this tar paper shack built on a circular track so they could rotate the entire building to follow the sun for lighting.
And they filmed everything. Vaudeville acts, boxers, Annie Oakley shooting targets. They were literally inventing the language of cinema.
They were, but it's funny, Edison had a blind spot here. He thought the future was in personal viewing boxes, the kinetoscope. He didn't initially see the potential of projecting the image for a large audience in a theater. He missed the communal experience. He caught up eventually, but others beat him to it.
Speaking of blind spots, this is a big one. We have to talk about the great ore milling disaster. This is the failure that almost completely wiped him out.
Yeah, this is the story that often gets left out of the highlight reel. In the 1890s, Edison becomes obsessed with iron mining. He has this idea that the high-grade iron ore in the U.S. is running out.
Okay.
So he decides he's going to invent a process to extract iron from low-grade, worthless rock. The plan was to crush these giant boulders into powder and then use massive electromagnets to pull out the iron dust.
And he pours his own money into this. He sells his valuable General Electric stock to fund it. He builds this enormous plant up in the mountains of New Jersey.
The place was like something out of a fantasy novel. He built rock crushers the size of buildings that could chew up piano-sized boulders in seconds. The ground shook for miles around. And here's the thing. Technically, it worked. He could get the iron out.
But the market didn't care about his technical success.
Geology beat him. Just as he perfected his process, vast, incredibly rich deposits of high-grade iron ore were discovered in the Mesabi Range in Minnesota, the kind you could just scoop up with a shovel.
So the price of iron ore just collapses.
It plummeted. Edison's expensive processed ore was worthless. He lost almost everything, the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars today.
And his reaction?
When he shut the plant down for good, he reportedly said, "Well, it's all gone, but we had a hell of a good time spending it."
That is just a staggering level of resilience. But he doesn't just walk away from the rubble. He looks at the giant piles of crushed rock he's created, and he pivots.
He looks at the fine sand, the waste product from his failed mine, and he says one word: cement. He takes the rock-crushing technology he invented for mining and applies it to the cement industry. He revolutionizes the kilns, making them longer, more efficient.
And he creates Edison Portland Cement.
A hugely successful company. His cement built the original Yankee Stadium. It built factories all over the country. He even had this wild idea for pouring single-piece concrete houses where you'd set up a mold and pour the walls, stairs, even the bathtub, all at once.
That sounds efficient.
It was efficient, but they were ugly and the molds were too expensive, so that part failed. But the cement business itself, that saved him financially and funded all his later work.
So let's move into the 20th century. Edison is now this iconic figure, the grand old man of invention. But he's still tinkering. He gets obsessed with batteries.
He was absolutely convinced that the future of transportation was the electric car.
Which, looking around today, he was right. Just about 100 years too early.
He hated gasoline cars, called them noisy, smelly, and unreliable. But the lead-acid batteries of the day were terrible. They were heavy, they leaked acid, they didn't last. So he spent nearly a decade and a fortune developing a better battery. The nickel-iron alkaline battery.
This was the project where he said that famous line about failure, right?
That's the one. A reporter asked him if he was discouraged by the thousands of failed experiments, and Edison said, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways it won't work." And that wasn't just a clever line. That was his actual methodology. For him, elimination was progress.
But by the time he perfects the battery, his good friend Henry Ford has flooded the market with the cheap, reliable Model T.
The internal combustion engine had won. The electric car was dead, at least for the next century. Another huge market failure for Edison.
But another pivot.
Another pivot. The battery was too expensive for cars, but it was incredibly rugged and long-lasting. It turned out to be perfect for industrial uses. It went into miners' headlamps, railroad signals, even powered early submarines. It ended up becoming his single most profitable product in his later years.
And we see him again during World War I. He's in his late 60s, early 70s, and he goes to Washington to head the Naval Consulting Board.
He wanted to apply his invention factory model to the war effort. He worked on things like submarine detection, but it was a huge culture clash. Edison was a guy who worked 18 hours a day and just tried stuff. The Navy was, well,
Bureaucracy.
All bureaucracy. He hated it. He could never get his ideas tested fast enough. But his lasting impact wasn't a specific weapon. He successfully lobbied Congress to create a permanent scientific R&D institution for the military, the Naval Research Laboratory. That lab still exists today.
And then finally, in his 80s, he takes on one last great crusade.
Rubber.
Rubber.
This was a national security issue. America was completely dependent on foreign rubber, mostly from British colonies in Asia. His friends Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone were terrified that a war could cut off the supply. No rubber means no tires. The whole economy grinds to a halt.
So this group of friends, the vagabonds, as they call themselves on their famous camping trips, they team up.
And Edison turns his winter estate in Fort Myers, Florida, into a botanical research lab. He starts testing thousands and thousands of different plant species, looking for a domestic source of latex. Can you picture it? An 80-year-old man, hunched over a microscope, still grinding, still looking for that needle in the haystack.
And he actually found it.
He did, goldenrod. He found a species of goldenrod that produced a decent amount of latex, and he started crossbreeding them to be taller and more productive. In the end, synthetic rubber was invented before his project could be scaled up, but he was working on it right up until the last days of his life.
Let's just touch on the man himself before we wrap up. He was married twice.
Yes. First to Mary Stillwell, who was one of his employees. It's a bit of a tragic story. She died very young of what was likely typhoid fever, leaving him with 3 young children. And Edison, well, he loved them, but he loved the laboratory more. He was not the most attentive father.
And his second wife, Mina Miller?
Mina was a different story. She was the daughter of an inventor herself. She was formidable. She understood that her husband was a national treasure. She basically took over his entire domestic life, managed the grand estate at Glenmont, handled all the social stuff, and created a protected space where he could just be a genius. She shielded him from the world so he could focus on changing it.
He died in October of 1931, and the world he left behind was just unrecognizable from the one he was born into.
Think about that. He was born into a world lit by candles, a world of silence where nothing moved faster than a horse. He died in a world of electric skylines, recorded music, motion pictures, and automobiles.
And the tribute they paid him was just perfect.
President Herbert Hoover asked the entire nation to dim its lights for 1 minute in his honor. On the night of his funeral, the lights on the Statue of Liberty went out. The lights on Broadway went dark. The modern world he helped create, briefly, turned itself off to honor the man who turned it on.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the real synthesis here? It's easy to just list the patents, but what's the ultimate lesson from his life?
For me, it's that Edison completely demystified the idea of genius. We have this romantic notion of genius as a lightning bolt from the sky, a sudden eureka moment.
Right.
Edison showed us that genius is a process. It's a system. It's having a library and a team and capital and a willingness to endure 10,000 failures to find the one thing that works.
It's the 99% perspiration.
Exactly. He created the blueprint for every R&D lab that followed, from Bell Labs to Silicon Valley. He showed us that you can, in a way, manufacture innovation if you just have the grit to work the system.
And that leads me to a final thought for all of you listening. We tend to accept our technology as if it were inevitable. Like, of course electricity was going to happen, and maybe the science was. But the system we have, the way our grid is structured, the way we consume media, all of that was shaped by the very specific personality, the stubbornness, the deafness, and the relentless curiosity of this one man from Ohio.
It really makes you wonder, what incredible technologies might we be missing out on today simply because there isn't an Edison-like figure to muscle them through that long, painful, failure-ridden process?
A fascinating what if. If you enjoyed this journey into the Invention Factory, make sure to subscribe to History Titans. We've got plenty more deep dives like this one coming your way.
And please hit that like button. It really does help us keep the lights on, pun fully intended.
And let us know in the comments. Which do you think was the more radical invention for humanity, the phonograph or the light bulb? I could argue it either way.
Oh, I'm on Team Phonograph. Preserving a moment in time. That's pure magic.
I think I have to stick with the light bulb. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next deep dive into the past.